the book of Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes chapter 6. Ecclesiastes chapter 6. We may mention the fact that Solomon has done this big experiment of life, trying to figure out what the purpose of life is. And as he writes about it, he tells a lot about the things that he has learned over the course of this experiment. And one of the things that he found was this: if a man lives a long, long life, but it's not good, it's vanity. And he also said that if a man lives and has 100 children, and back then 100 children was a wonderful blessing, wasn't it? If he has 100 children, but yet he dies and nobody's there for his burial, what good has his life been? And then Solomon says it would have been better for that man to have, does anybody remember? Died when? Huh? Yes, to die in the womb, to have been miscarried. Okay, isn't that an unbelievable scenario? You know, that he would even bring that up. You know, it's almost to us grotesque kind of, isn't it? That he would even talk about that. But what he's trying to get us to understand is how bad the situation is if a man lives a long life but it's not good, and he doesn't have any children that respects him and loves him enough to come to his funeral. That is a bad life. Better for him to have died in the womb. He goes back to that man, okay, in verse 6 of Ecclesiastes 6. Yea, though he live 1,000 years, twice told, yet hath seen no good, do not all go unto one place? Some might think, well, okay, here's a man lives a long life. Well, what if we could extend his life to 1,000 years and then double it? Surely, if he lives 2,000 years, at least it ought to be a somewhat good, right? And Solomon says what? Not so. Doesn't matter. If your life is not good, it doesn't matter how long you live. Okay? The additional years do not lessen the misery. They only increase the what? The unhappiness and the sorrow and the difficulties of life. Notice the lesson there. The length of one's life does not determine the quality of a person's life. There have been many individuals who have lived few years but have had a wonderful life. You know that? I've given a couple of examples there. A man by the name of John Coltrane was a jazz saxophonist who produced a wealth of music before dying at the age of 40 years old. Sometimes I'm amazed at how much an individual can accomplish in just a brief amount of time, you know it? And you look at their life and you go, how'd they get all that done? And then there's others live a long life and get nothing done. What good is that? Notice this next one. And we could do some study on this and we may never find the answer to this question. Notice, Methuselah lived to be 969 years old. The oldest man to have ever lived. Now notice this next point. The flood happened in the year of his death. Okay? Now the question is what? Did he die before the flood, or did he die in the flood? Does that make a difference? Peggy says yes. I heard a little yep. If he died before the flood, maybe he was righteous. If he died in the flood, guess what? He was just as wicked as the rest of the world. Now think about that. 969 years and you die in the flood, what good was the length of his life? It meant nothing, did it? Just because he has the notoriety of being the oldest man to have ever lived means absolutely nothing if he died in the flood. How?
One way he got wet, one way he didn't, but he still went to the same place.
Oh yes. Oh yes. But see, here, and that's the next point that Solomon makes, does he not? Do not all go to one place? Doesn't matter whether you die at the age of 30, 70. I saw a picture of a lady on Facebook this morning, 114 years old. Or whether you're Methuselah and you die at 969, we all go where? To one place. We all die, don't we? We all die. So very, very interesting. We're all heading to the grave, aren't we? Unless our Lord comes again. Now Solomon reverts back and starts talking about some other things. Okay? And this is why it makes the book of Ecclesiastes so hard to outline. Usually I outline a book. Okay? And yet when you go in to read Solomon, he's bouncing back and forth from subject to subject to subject that it's hard to outline sometimes. But you see when he changes the topics. And notice what he says. All the labor of a man is for his mouth, and yet his appetite is not filled. Wow. There are two ways to approach the verse. Literally and figuratively. Okay? Literally and figuratively. Notice. A man is supposed to labor in order to what? To eat. Isn't that what the Bible says? Yes. 2 Thessalonians 3:10. For even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Folks, there's a biblical principle. If a man isn't going to work. Now what he means by that is this. If a man is capable, if he's able, right? Then that man ought to what? Work for a living. It's not the responsibility of everybody else to provide for his needs. Okay? But guess what happens? You work, you feed yourself, and guess what? You never totally satisfy your appetite, do you? Most of us have eaten breakfast, haven't we? You're going to leave here, and what are you going to do? You're going to eat again? Well, you just had breakfast. What's wrong with you? And then about 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4:30, some of you are going to eat again, aren't you? And then about 9, you may snack a little. And then there's still the midnight snack. Unbelievable. You see, we labor to fill our mouth, but our appetite is what? Never satisfied. And so it could be a literal application. The appetite is not filled. Notice Proverbs 16:26, almost an exact wording of what he just said. He that laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him. If we're going to eat, we have to what? Work. Because our mouth craves food, doesn't it? And we need sustenance. And the way we get that is by working for it. But notice this next one. Figuratively, we labor in order to satisfy our appetites. That is, our longing for material things. Right? All of you got a house? Most of us do, don't we? Got a car? Clothes? Jewelry? A dog? I'm sorry, a cat. Got to throw those things in. If you don't, somebody's going to get mad. A fish. Don't want to skip anybody. You see, we have these desires and these longings, don't we? Okay. Now, you would think that once our desires are filled, everything's fine, right? No. You go buy yourself something, it lasts about 5 minutes, and there's something else you want. And so guess what we got to go do again? We got to go work for it some more, don't we? Unbelievable. We want something, we work hard to obtain it, we get it, it satisfies for a short time, then we are longing for something else. And what's interesting about that is, that's for all who? For all humanity. Remember I told you that Solomon talks about, oftentimes we like to divide ourselves from one another, and yet we're all what? So much alike. Okay? We're so much more alike than we are different as human beings. The lesson, true contentment is not something that is easy to acquire. You know that? It's difficult, isn't it? Right now, as far as something that I really need, I couldn't write it down for you. This is something that I really need. I couldn't write that down for you right now. Now, if you ask me, is there something you want? Oh, yeah. I got about 10 things. If you're generous enough, come to me. And it's hard to be what? It's hard to be content, isn't it? Now, do I need the things that I want? I don't even need them. Okay? I'll give you one. See, I'm putting it out there for you. I've got a little collection of these Grinch figurines. Okay? About 5 of them. And there's about 2 or 3 more in that collection that I would love to have. Okay? And they cost about, $50 to $75. That'll let you know how many hours you got to work to get that. And I'd love to have those to just stick in my little collection to look at. And isn't that what Solomon said? We buy things to what? To look at. What good does it do me to have them? Well, look at there. I finally got the whole collection. So, next I want what? Another collection. Or something else, won't we? It's amazing to me how many tattoos a person can put on their body. You know it? But once you get one, I'm always told, you want what? More. Got one, most of them got 10, 20, a sleeve full. And I don't know how tattoos lead to piercings, do you? That's always puzzled me. But notice, true contentment is not something that individuals easily acquire. Why? Number one, it requires honesty. Doesn't it? I do not really need this or that. Oh yeah, I want it, but I don't need it. I've got everything that I need. Number two, it requires sacrifice, doesn't it? It requires sacrifice. I will not purchase that item. So I have to sacrifice that, don't I? I have to set that aside. And guess what I don't want to do? I don't want to do that. How about this next one? It requires the rejection of jealousy. Now what I mean by that is this. We deny ourselves something, right? I'm not going to go get that new car. I really don't need it. Tomorrow I get up and my neighbor has his new car. Ugh. That scoundrel. And you walk by it. Ooh, the smell of new leather. Ooh. I can't believe he bought that car. And I wanted one so bad. And I sacrificed, but not him. See, we can get jealous when other people don't sacrifice when we have. And it's hard to do that. It requires a spiritual mind, doesn't it? Temporal things are not important. You know what? I think I got somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 books. Okay, somewhere in that neighborhood. And guess what? Nobody in my family wants them when I die. By that I mean my kids. And I'm certain my grandkids don't. And so they'll go to a school of preaching. They'll go somewhere. Okay, but so what? It's what? It's a temporal thing, isn't it? And even if the Lord comes, I won't take one volume with me. Not one. Every one of them will be burned up on this earth, won't they? Why? Because those books are temporal in nature. You see, it's hard to think what? It's hard to think spiritually, isn't it? It's difficult to keep our minds focused on that. Should I go on a trip or should I support a missionary who's going on a trip? Boy, there's a biggie, isn't it? And how do I deny myself my trip so that he can take his trip to save souls? Boy, if you ever reach that pinnacle of spirituality, that's pretty big, isn't it? Okay? Because it's not easy to do. And then lastly, it requires a vision of the future. One of these days I'll die, and I'll what? I'll just leave it all behind. If I can ever get that vision, I don't need this because I'm just going to what? I'm just going to leave it here. Why do I need it? If I could keep these kind of principles in mind, it will help me to become a very content person. But guys, it's not easy, is it? Not easy. Questions, comments, anybody? Yes, sir.
You say it's not easy, but if we teach our children, I fully believe if we're sincere by showing our children what we do, I do believe that in 50% of the time, our children will follow our lead. Because I see it in my children. I have one son that if he sees a new iPhone, he has to have it. Every time one comes out, he has to have it. Me? I just finally got a new phone a few years ago, and I went from a 3 to a 9, and I'm still way out of the picture.
I thought he was going to go from a bag phone to a flip phone.
And so I wholly believe that if you show your Christian attitude, it's not going to go to everybody, but you will touch their lives and it will sink in, hopefully 50% of the time.
We hope so, don't we? But like I said, this pool, we live in the world, don't we? And the world has such, there's one man who put it this way: there are so many voices calling. Okay? And I'm just what? I'm just dad. I'm one voice in their life. And they get out and their friends have this and their friends have that, and they're in this crowd and that crowd does this, and it's just hard for them, isn't it? It's not easy. And but we have to instill those, or like Dad said, we have to try to instill these kind of Christian principles in them. But, how many of us really live by those principles ourselves all the time? That's hard to do, isn't it? It's very difficult to do. So it's just tough. All right, so Solomon sticks that in there. And, man, now notice what he says. It gets a little confusing, okay? For what hath the wise more than the fool? What hath the poor that knoweth to walk before the living? Well, there's a toughie, isn't it? If you just pull that verse out of its context and say, okay, what does that mean? I bet none of us would get it right. It's just hard, isn't it? It's difficult. Notice again, we have a tendency to divide men into various categories, don't we? Notice what he says. For what hath a wise man more than a what? Fool. You see the distinction? There's the wise and there's the fool. There's the rich and there's the poor. You see, we're constantly dividing men into different things. But notice the next point. There are many things that are common between all humans. Regarding our present study, notice the commonalities. The yearning of desires is common among who? Among all men. Okay? A rich man wants a a bigger mansion, right? A poor man sure would love a two-man tent if he's homeless, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, that's better than just living on the street. So they both have what? A yearning for something more. And that's common among all men. For what hath the wise man more than who? More than the fool. We both have our desires. We both have our yearnings. We both have this difficulty being what? Content with the things that we have. Their appetites are not satisfied. The lack of contentment is common among all men. They are not happy with what they have. There are senses in which the wise is no different than what? Than a fool. And the poor is no different than the rich. There's that old saying that all men get up in the morning and put their pants on. Isn't that right? And it doesn't matter whether you're putting on Gucci or Levi's. You're all putting on pants, aren't you? What's that? Yesterday, Bill, he said he saw a woman outside and she had those holy breeches on, you know the ones with all the holes in them. He says she fell right through them and hung herself. That's Bill Horn for you right there. If you don't come to Clothing Day, you're missing a comedy show from Bill Horn. Notice the lesson. When mankind starts seeing their likenesses and focus on those things, there will be healing that takes place among them. Differences divide, likenesses bring individuals together. Why would individuals want us divided? There's got to be a reason, right? Rather than what? Rather than together. Now here's the thing that's interesting to me, is there's one place, and sadly, we're still divided in that one place. But there's one place that God created where He wants there to be no division, period. And that's the precious church of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That's the very reason He gave the church, is to bring us all together. And yet, we're still divided in the church, aren't we? And it's tough. But we've got to start seeing our likenesses. You know, we got to see past skin and see the soul, don't we? And we got to get past riches and see the soul of man. And it's very hard to do. Now notice that last statement, because it's kind of an interesting one. What hath the poor? And what he means by that, what hath the poor more than the rich? And then he says this, that knoweth to walk before the living. Now what in the world does he mean? Anybody ever driven down the road and seen a homeless person? Somebody describe one to me. Okay, yeah. They're fairly dirty. Their clothes are usually very unkempt, right? Yeah, they got all their possessions with them. Yesterday morning after that big rain, I was driving home, I saw this woman. She was pushing this cart, and I couldn't believe how much stuff she had loaded on that cart. If you need her to help you move, she can load a U-Haul, guys. Okay? It was unbelievable. But that's all she had, isn't it? Sometimes you can tell they're crippled, can't you? You know, that their health has not been taken care of well. Okay? You know, and have you ever looked at a person like that and thought, could I live like that? And you know what my answer to that is? I don't think I could. Okay? I've always thought, you know, yesterday afternoon, a cloud started coming up again and looked like it was coming right toward the beach. Fortunately, it kind of dissipated, but I've always thought, you know, you see this storm coming and you're a homeless person. You don't have a tent. What do you do? Or like, when was it? Was it Thursday afternoon when it rained for about 5 hours straight? Where do they go? What do they do? How do they stay dry during 5 hours of just pouring, driving rain? And yet they what? They do, don't they? Now see, like I said, I don't think I can. But they learn how. Now notice what Solomon says, that knoweth to walk before the living. They adjust, they survive, they are at their place, aren't they? Day by day. Do certain homeless have certain places where you know they're going to be? Yeah. When we used to have breakfasts here or different things, Tim Curtis, he'd say, loan me up a couple of plates. He says, there's a homeless guy that I pass every day. And he'd just stop, and same homeless guy every day. I mean, every time he had a little bit of stuff, he knew that guy was going to be there. And, these people learn to live in the land of the living, don't they? Even though they're just as poor as they could possibly be. Dutch?
The other part to that is they can look you in the eye a lot more than you can look them in the eye because you don't want to help them. And so you're feeling bad because you don't want to look them in the eye for fear that you're going to be touched to give them something.
Yep. It's hard. There's no doubt. So very, very interesting. Again, we're more alike than we are different, folks. Now notice this next statement. Solomon goes back to this idea of contentment. Remember, what he said was we need to be content, right? Okay? And that it's difficult to be content. And he says that feeling of not being content is the same among rich and poor. It's the same among all humanity. We all have struggled with that. Now notice what he says. Better is the sight of the eyes than wandering desire. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Wandering desire. We all have it, don't we? Wandering desire. Man, a nicer car, a bigger house, a better paying job, expansion of one's business, more vacations, wandering desires, one more Grinch to my collection. You see, we all have wandering desires, don't we? But notice what he says. Solomon, however, tells us that the sight of the eyes is better than wandering desires. It is better to focus on the things you do have than the things you don't have. Book comes out, Vic says, boy, I'd like to have that book. I got 5,999 I hadn't even read yet. Why can't I just be satisfied and start reading one of those, right? But oh no, I got to have that other book. Why? And that's what I put down there. That's the reason I put that one on there, okay? I include myself in this stuff, all right? Books that have not been read, okay? There might be a host of things that could occupy your time and bring happiness, you know it? Clothes that could be matched and rematched. I got a little laugh out of Emily up here on that one. Have you ever worn something that you've never worn before and somebody says, is that new? And you say what? No, I just kind of rearranged some stuff. Okay? You see, you didn't need a brand new wardrobe. You just needed to learn how to what? Mix and match things up. Okay? How about this one? Hobbies that could be done around the home. I didn't say chores. No, I didn't say chores. You know, I know better than that. You got to choose your words carefully. Okay? No, honeydews are always there. Okay, but aren't there things we could do around the house if we really wanted to? You know, I know Jeannie, she's got her little garden, don't you, Jeannie, in the back of the house. And, you know, some of us have an instrument that we bought maybe sometime. We just set it aside, never learned really how to play it. Okay? Go get it out of the closet. Learn how to do it. Well, I won't go there. Second jobs. Okay? Second jobs. That would be better than what? Spending more money, right? And there's a lot of second jobs. Writing, dog sitting, landscaping, cleaning for others. Maybe just this, volunteer work. Just volunteer your time. Rather than, you know, thinking all the time for myself, go out and do something for others and spend that time for them. Okay? There are drawbacks to wandering desires, aren't there? Number one, they never come. Number two, they cost a lot of money. Number three, they are not as enjoyable as expected. Number four, they do not satisfy our lust for more. And number five, they cause us to lose our happiness at the moment. We can't enjoy what we have because we're always what? Wanting more. Now notice how Solomon ends the verse. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. All right, Miss Beverly. No, I saved you hoping the bell would ring. Now wait, Beverly's got something.
Yesterday, I was unable to come to the closing thing. Bill came in there and got me about 7 o'clock. Well, I had that set for 2 hours. And I've never missed a closing, and I love to go. We got to meet new people, just everything. Just talk with all my Christians. And I said, I just can't go. I couldn't push it. I had gone to the doctor, and that takes all day, especially at Mayo Clinic. And it takes all day, and I was just tired and couldn't move. And I slept, I got when Bill left to go up here, I had slept 4 more wonderful hours. And when I woke up, I felt powerful. I felt, and I just went through the house real quick, didn't let him know, because I always supposed to leave it half for him to do. And I felt so good, and that's when I had to leave. I had to stay there.
Well, sometimes we're just not able.
God forgive me because I couldn't come, but
Well, sometimes when we're physically unable, God knows that. We don't even have to ask for His forgiveness, do we?
I should have.
Sometimes you have to stay at home. Here's the deal. When we know God would see it differently, then we better see it the way God sees it. Okay? Rodney?
Just commenting on what Dutch said, my dad is just the opposite. He's still living in the caveman days. That's one of those phones that you open up.
There you go. Does it still call people? Can you still call him?
He doesn't call very much. He doesn't like to talk on the phone.
But see, it works. You know, that's the crazy thing. It works.